Hello besties and welcome to another Genshin theory! In my last video I mentioned that I was working on a theory about Zhongli, and that's what we're doing today! I have no idea how I've gotten away with not making a video about Zhongli for so long. He's my favorite character and has the most lore out of anyone we've met so far, so I feel like this is long overdue. I've mentioned this in past theories before, but I'll quickly go over it again in case you're new here. At the end of No Mere Stone, Zhongli's second story quest, you ask them about Khaenri'ah. Rather than giving us any kind of answer, Zhongli just tells us they're not allowed to talk about it because of a contract with an unnamed party.
So, not long ago, we met a guy called Dane. He told us about Khaenri'ah and the punishment of the gods. That's when we realized that those events were connected to the person we're searching for. Zhongli, you're a god. You've lived through thousands of years of history. Surely you experienced the incident?
I cannot say.
Why? You can't even give us a thread of information? This is so important to us.
I understand. But I must apologize. This is my contract.
You mean another past grievance? Like the incident with Ejda? Too painful to tell.
It was signed before it all began. I have always honored the contract. And kept my silence.
How can you be like that?
You two are friends to me. I can assure it brings me no pleasure to disappoint you. But as the god of contracts, I cannot go back on my word.
Would you be ready to find out?
It appears your understanding of this world continues to grow. There are many events of ages past, many secrets that lie hidden. They have been eroded by time, forgotten by the people, abandoned. But you are capable of finding them and bringing them into the light.
There's a lot to unpack with that, so let's start with what the contract actually is. The real-world equivalent would be a non-disclosure agreement, more commonly referred to as an NDA. An NDA is an agreement where the disclosing party tells the receiving party confidential information, and the receiving party must keep that information confidential or they'll face legal consequences. These are pretty common in politics and business, although they've seen more mainstream attention recently with social media influencers. Here's an example of an NDA, and remember this template because I'll come back to it in a minute. The receiving party in the NDA Zhongli tells us about is him, but we don't know for sure who the disclosing party is. It's safe to assume that it's the celestial gods considering the context of the situation. This is an NDA meant to keep Zhongli from telling people about what happened in Khaenri'ah, and the only people who I can think would want to prevent that would be them. The celestial gods have a history of destroying secular nations, and it's heavily implied that they were the ones to initiate the fall of Khaenri'ah, but I already covered all that in my Khaenri'ah series. The point is that the disclosing party has to be Celestia. Let's take a look at that example NDA from before. This is what it would look like if it was the NDA that Zhongli was talking about. This is a pretty basic template for an NDA, but others can be way more complicated depending on the circumstances. This is an example of a unilateral NDA, which is the legal term for an NDA with only one receiving party. But I don't think that's what this NDA really is in Genshin. I think it's a multilateral NDA. That's just the opposite of a unilateral NDA. It has multiple receiving parties rather than just one. In this case, the disclosing party Celestia would say the same, but the receiving parties would be all of the individual Archons. Zhongli isn't the only Archon who doesn't talk about Khaenri'ah or Celestia. A doesn't say anything about it either. Unlike Zhongli, A removed herself from Celestia a long time ago. She hasn't had her Gnosis for a while. She had Yae look after it until she gave it up to Scaramouche. You can't see Celestia from Inazuma. The only other place in Genshin where you can't see Celestia was the Golden Apple Archipelago. Inazuma is unique because it's detached from Celestia while the other countries aren't. Inazuma's separation from Celestia could be a sign that A isn't and never was involved in the NDA. But I still think she and the rest of the Archons are part of it. A's separation from Celestia could mean that her involvement in the NDA is terminated, but let's look back at that NDA template from earlier. It says the non-disclosure provisions of this agreement shall survive the termination of this agreement, and the receiving party's duty to hold confidential information in confidence shall remain in effect. That just means that even if the NDA is dissolved, the receiving party still isn't allowed to say anything. That basically makes terminating the contract pointless, so even if all of the other Archons also decided to distance themselves and their countries from Celestia like A did, they would still have to keep quiet about Khaenri'ah. When A told us about Makoto's death in Khaenri'ah, she was very careful about it. Notice how she never mentioned Khaenri'ah directly. All she said was, "I've seen a nation stride forward and lose everything to the heavenly principles."
But I've seen a nation stride forward and lose everything to the heavenly principles. Perhaps only if time stands still will the lightning's glow never fade.
The only indication that she was talking about Conria was the flashback cutscene we saw, but in the lore of the game, Traveler doesn't get to watch that convenient cutscene. They would have no way of knowing exactly which nation A was referencing because they're aware of other countries destroyed by Celestia. That's why we still think that the NDA only involves Zhongli, but it actually could also include A and the rest of the Archons. It's impossible to tell whose side each Archon is on until we've met them, so for now I do think that all of them are part of the NDA. But even if they were to terminate their end, the NDA is still in effect. If any of the Archons have violated their side of the contract, it's the Tsaritsa and Venti. Venti is the only Archon who actually mentions Celestia by name, and the Tsaritsa is preparing to wage a continental war against them.
Celestia? I'm not sure even I could fly that far. In any case, the water there tastes foul, and the fruit is bland. You know what that means. No cider! In that case, I wouldn't go there even if I was invited.
But in my last video, I talked about the possibility of Venti not actually being the true Anemo Archon, which only leaves the Tsaritsa. On the Genshin wiki, it says that the Tsaritsa formed the Fatui to challenge the principles that Teyvat was founded on. As we already know, principles mean Celestia and their rules. In my Conria series, I talked about how the Tsaritsa is taking each Archon's Gnosis to weaken their connection to Celestia. For the most part, it's been fairly easy for her to get them all. A already didn't use hers, Zhongli willingly gave his up, and it wasn't that hard to take Venti's. I don't think the Tsaritsa actually wanted to steal Venti's Gnosis like that. I think that just had to do with Signora's exile from Mondstadt, and it was just revenge on him. Zhongli wasn't the only one to form a contract with the Fatui in exchange for their Gnosis. Yai did the same thing with A's. She says that in return for sparing the Traveler's life, she would give A's Gnosis to Scaramouche. But once he got the Gnosis, Scaramouche cut off contact with the Fatui and kept it for himself. We'll definitely see him again, and he'll have the Gnosis stolen from him by another Harbinger or the Tsaritsa herself. The point is that the Fatui, and by extension the Tsaritsa, are willing to cooperate with the other Archons to achieve their goal of challenging Celestia. It's just a matter of figuring out exactly what the Tsaritsa is willing to do in exchange for their cooperation. When you first meet Zhongli, they say that the time of mankind is slowly dawning. We already know what that means. Celestia is losing power and humans are gaining it. But this creates a huge problem. Celestia losing its power now doesn't mean that they still don't have any. We know that they don't like it when humans are self-sufficient, which is why Conria and Salvindagnir fell. Both of those countries operated without a god, a liaison of Celestia, overseeing them, and they were destroyed because of that. Now that Morax has given up control of Liyue to humans, that puts the country at risk of being attacked by Celestia. But we know how much Zhongli loves Liyue, so I doubt they'd endanger the country on purpose without a contingency plan. The Tsaritsa is among the most influential of the Archons. She's managed to get plenty of other Archons to side with her, and she has her army stationed throughout the entire continent. In exchange for his Gnosis, she probably promised Zhongli protection of Liyue in the event of a disaster. The Fatui are all over Liyue, and it's not like they're doing much. They're not collecting debts or looking for Gnosis, they're kinda just standing around. I think the Tsaritsa sent them across the whole country to protect it in case something bad were to happen. And besides, if Celestia were to attack Liyue, it's not like they'd be completely defenseless without the Fatui. They still have the Adepti, and even though Zhongli doesn't have a Gnosis anymore, they are still an Adeptus. The Fatui didn't help during the fight against Osile because Child thought that we were lying about the location of Morax's Gnosis. I think that under the right circumstances, they would be willing to help. So we know that the Tsaritsa and Zhongli are both prepared to fight Celestia, but what about the other Archons? A seems kinda disconnected from all of this. When we went to talk to her about the Raiden Shogun's actions, she basically told us that she had no idea what was going on. It wouldn't surprise me if she didn't know that the Tsaritsa has been planning to challenge Celestia, especially since A's already been distanced from Celestia for so long. But now that she knows, I think she's more than happy to help the Tsaritsa. She stopped using her Gnosis a long time ago because she doesn't like Celestia and doesn't want to be associated with them. Although her actions are more passive, A is still on the Tsaritsa's side. I'm not too sure about Venti. He's not super involved in the government of his country like A is, and the Mondstadt Archon quests didn't really involve the Fatui like the Liyue ones did. In my last video, I theorized that Venti may not be Barbatos, the god of freedom, but the god of time instead. I don't fully believe that, but even if that's true, the god of time works closely with Barbatos, so naturally they would have a similar resolve to keep Teyvat free from Celestia's tyranny. Like I said earlier, I don't think Signora violently taking Venti's Gnosis was what the Tsaritsa wanted. Signora has her own personal problems with Venti, and she was just taking it out on him then. I don't think it has much to do with the Gnosis at all. So far, 4 of the 7 Archons look like they're willing to oppose Celestia. As of now, we don't know much about the remaining 3, but I still want to give some predictions on where their loyalties will lie. The next region we're going to is Sumeru, and their Archon is named Kusanali. She's the only Archon who didn't hold the position during the Cataclysm in Conria, and her full title is Lesser Lord Kusanali, which I find interesting considering that she's supposed to be in charge of her country. The original Dendro Archon who died in the Cataclysm actually had Kusanali's role now, and maybe out of respect for her deceased superior, she keeps Lesser in her name. In that case, she'd probably be mad at Celestia for causing the death of her predecessor. The Hydro Archon is the god of justice, so you'd think that they want to get back at Celestia for what they've done to Teyvat. But Dainsleif says that even she knows not to make an enemy of the divine. It's probably going to take some convincing to get the Hydro Archon to agree with the Tsaritsa, but given their morals, I think it'll happen. Murata is the Pyro Archon who presides over Natlan. She's the god of war, so she'd likely be pretty excited to participate in a war against Celestia. It also seems like she cares a lot about humans, despite how little we know about her. People from Natlan are called children of Murata or Muradins, which I think is pretty endearing coming from her. I've mentioned this in the past, but I'll say it again now. I think the Archon quests are building up to a final confrontation with Celestia side by side with the Abyss Order. We have loyalties on both sides. We're friends with the Archons and our sibling is leading the Abyss Order. The Archons and the Abyss Order have a common enemy, and I think it's going to be up to us to unite them against Celestia. Sorry for uploading this video a week late! I was really busy with college applications, so I had to take a week off from uploading to deal with that. But now that all of my applications are in, hopefully I'll have enough time to work on videos again. I feel like a lot has happened in terms of leaks in the week that I've been away. This isn't confirmed, so don't believe me 100%, but I think Albedo is going to be the next banner after Hu Tao, and I really wanted him when he came out, but I didn't get him, so please wish me luck! I have to win 50-50 for him, so I'm kinda nervous. Let me know who you're pulling for too! Hu Tao is amazing, so I really hope everyone who wants her gets her, and Ito looks super fun too. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye, besties!